Now, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, the main event. On the undercard, another heavyweight bout. Johnny Fisher versus David Allen. An intriguing fight. First of all, Johnny Fisher, this for him is probably on paper his toughest test in David Allen. Talk to me about Johnny Fisher and in your opinion, his progress.
His progress has been good. You can't criticize him. He's done everything that's been asked of him. Did a few of his fights early on when he was coming through. Not covered him for a while. But he's very sensible. He's an intelligent guy. He understands that it's a long road, that you have to make sure you keep learning, have the right people around you. I think he's got that. The kind of family business that has become Johnny Fisher and his old man is very, very well organised. It takes the pressure off him, but it's crucial to his success because as well as being able to fight, he shifts an unbelievable amount of tickets, and that really does matter. And the way they've done that, the industry they've kind of created around it is really impressive. It's really impressive, and he is progressing in the ring. He is getting better. Not just anybody gets voted, the Boxing Writers Young Boxer of the Year, and he had that a couple of years ago. I mean, the list of people who've been given that award is impressive, and I think they brought him on and matched him well. And I think this is a good fight for him. I'm not really sure what we're going to get from Dave because it is hard to know. I covered him a lot when he was at his absolute peak, if you like, in terms of the popularity. Um, the win against Lucas Brown, the win against Nick Webb, stepping up and taking those short notice fights. I think some of them he knows now probably weren't the best idea, but at the time, that was what he chose to do. What he feels now is that he's that bit older, that bit wiser. He'll buckle down. He buckles down to his training more. He's got a couple of kids, so his life's just a lot more balanced and a lot more sensible. And that he's now much better for it. We didn't see an enormous amount of evidence for that when he boxed Fraser Clarke, but he is convincing, Dave, right? And he can fight. We all know that. And technically, he's actually quite good. So if he can bring a good performance, then it should be a good fight. It should be a good fight because it's like a second career for him, Dave, almost. He's got that popularity still. And I think if he could really do something in this fight, even if he doesn't win, then there are fights out there for him. What I would really love to see with him in this kind of second installment is for him to, okay, I understand why you take the Fraser Clarke fight because it kind of gets you back on that big platform. I understand why you're taking this fight. The performance against Fraser Clarke won't have done much to convince people that he's capable of challenging at that kind of domestic level. They're probably looking at him and thinking he's still just going to be this guy that people choose to kind of get on their record because people know who he is and it might sell a few tickets and it looks good on an undercard. But if he could perform well against Johnny Fisher, win, lose or draw, then I think there is a possibility that he can then just box at his level and maybe win some titles. I'm sure he'd love to win an English title. He had the opportunity to win a Commonwealth title back in the day against Lenroy Thomas, and at Bramall Lane he should really have won that fight on the Brooke Spence undercard. But I wouldn't say he froze, but it was there for him and he didn't do it. And then in the rematch, clash of heads early on, and the opportunity went away. And I'm sure he regrets that. I'm sure he would like to, you know, I'm sure he would love to put some hardware on the mantelpiece. I think that's the aim for him, really, and make some money. Of course, that's always the aim.
You sort of got into there about, a little bit as to why this is the right fight for Dave Allen right now. Why is this the right fight for Johnny Fisher right now?
Because I think that Allen is experienced. He's been in there with some good fighters. A lot of those fights happened a little while ago, but people do know that he can fight. No one's looking at him and thinking he's some kind of mug because he absolutely isn't. And having done what he did to Babbage, who I thought was a good match for him, then I think it's a sensible next fight for him. Basically, I was kind of surprised when it appeared on the undercard of the rematch between Usyk and Fury. Honestly, I kind of was because it's kind of like a decent high-ish up the card support fight for domestic bill. I would say a big domestic bill. But good luck to them. They're going to get well paid. It's a big platform. I've got no problem with it. I just kind of it did take me a little bit by surprise, I guess. But it's a good next step for him because you don't want to move too quick, particularly at heavyweight. Because if you move too quick and somebody has a bad night and a difficult night, a bad experience, basically, it can really destroy someone's confidence in a way that it probably doesn't quite at other weights. And there's no rush. He is still young, so you just don't need to take undue risks. You don't want someone to stagnate. You don't want someone to just become too protected. And people will always accuse him of that because he sells so many tickets. But that isn't what they're doing with him. They're just taking their time and they're being sensible. And yeah, I didn't have any problem with this match when it was made.
Does it ever worry you when somebody like Dave Allen, who's tipped his toes into retirement and he's obviously come back a few small hall fights and obviously he's fought the Fraser Clarke fight and didn't look his best on back on the big stage. Does it worry you when he comes back in? Is it just a financial gain for someone like Dave Allen?
I mean, it does worry you a bit sometimes because I wouldn't say he got used and abused the first time around, but he did make some good money, and that it's his decision as to whether you take a fight or not. And fighters want to fight. I always kind of rail against this idea that boxers are these. I completely rail against it that boxers are these hapless souls who don't really understand the risks and they're being taken advantage of by these big evil promoters. That's incredibly insulting to intelligent athletes, and they are intelligent athletes. You have to be really to be a boxer. It kind of comes with the territory. So they're their decisions, and they make them in full knowledge of what the agendas are generally and what the risks are. And I thought he probably did take too many risks that first time around. And at a point there, his speech did sound slightly slurred at times, and that was a worry. But he sounds different now, and that can happen. When you have a bit of a layoff and you're maybe looking after yourself a little bit better. Maybe you're not sparring as hard as you used to do, because that's another thing. He did a ton of really hard sparring, and I think just all round, he's looking after himself better. And his training team, he basically used to train himself. You never really knew he was going to turn up in the corner with him, which was Mick Marston did it a lot of the time, but just because he cares about Dave and he just wanted to kind of look after him as much as he could. But he was never really in charge. Sometimes he'd tell us, well, I've been training myself at a fitness first. And you just think that's not, but with Jamie Moore and Nigel Travis, that won't be happening. They won't be allowing him to go off and get his head bashed in sparring for 10, 15 rounds somewhere for no money. That just won't be happening. So I think in that regard, things are completely different to how they were the first time around. And it's possible, it's perfectly possible that there's some really good performances left in him.
You come on perfectly to my last question on this topic, and that is the training team around Dave, and that is Jamie Moore, Nigel Travis over in um, Walkden there. Now, do you think, one, how much of a benefit is it to Dave to have this team around him? But also, is it almost a bit of a hard task for Jamie and Nigel? Because I know Dave's used their facilities a few times, but I don't know how closely they've done together, worked together. I don't know if they've done any camps previously together. So is it for them where it's a new fighter and into a big stage for him at this point of his career? Is it a tough task for the training team?
I mean, I don't think it's easy, but at the same time, if they didn't feel like it was going to work, then it would be over already. I think because they would need a level of commitment from him inside the gym and outside the gym. So, they would need to see certain things when he was actually physically there training with them, and they would need to know that he was doing the right things when he wasn't with them. And they'll know whether he was doing the right things when he wasn't with them by looking at him when he is with them. Because I've been doing this a long time, somebody can say to you, no, 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 I have been sticking to the diet, I have been doing this, I have been doing that. And then you put them through their paces and you know that they're lying. They just know, there's just no bullshitting people who've been doing this a long time. So I feel like if they didn't think it was working out, it would already have stopped. It'll be interesting to get some details nearer the time of how they've done it, as to whether he's moved over to Manchester for camp full time, or at least for the last few weeks, or whether he hasn't. I always find that quite interesting. But I do believe him when he says, Dave, that he's, because he's older now. He's a dad. He's more mature. He's, just leaves just by just naturally leads a much more settled, regimented, kind of timetabled life, because you have to. I've got a young kid myself, and it just they kind of dictate everything you do. Really, you get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, whether you like it or not. That's just what happens. And if you don't want to be completely knackered, you need to go to bed a bit earlier than you used to. So that just kind of gets thrust on you. And for an athlete, that's probably not a bad thing. You probably need to get away from that the final few weeks of camp, because you want to make sure your sleep's not broken, and just basic things like that. But in general, I think it kind of works. Yeah, I mean, he's a kind of lad, Dave, where you just kind of you pull for him. You just want things to work out for him. I feel like it's an uphill task against Fisher, because he's young and he's fresh and he's pretty good from the look of it so far. And he's definitely got the potential to get a lot better, just because of how he is. He is very much that guy with a kind of growth mindset, where he wants knowledge, he wants instruction, he wants to absorb things. He'll listen to what you tell him and do his absolute best to put it into practice. He will trust Mark Tibbs and believe that if he does all the things he's being asked to do in the gym, that he will give himself a very good chance of winning. He won't believe that it means he definitely will. I just feel like with Fisher, the kind of the mental package, that kind of realism and acceptance of what it is that of the game that you're in. I feel like he's got that. And I think if you've got that and you're willing to train hard, then it's not like talent, as people describe it, doesn't matter. But I feel like you can go a really long way if you've got some. You don't have to have loads.